we look at have this kind of evolutionary or anthropological background of like, why is it so scary to stand up in front of four people and give a presentation? Because if you did that back in the day, if you stood up in front of a few members of your tribe and were like, hey, I think there's more like berries on the other side of that mountain. And if they didn't like what you had to say, they might club you over the head. What I've noticed with my clients is that when I give them permission to be a little more vulnerable, then you start to notice the reaction and you start to build the relationships. And you notice that like, hey, nobody else is doing this because it's too scary. And I'm just doing it like 10%. And that 10% is enough to kind of get me noticed and have people just be a little more on board with my recommendations. They're paying a little more attention when it's my turn to talk in the meeting. Or I got a ton of great feedback at my AGM last month and performance reviews are better. Like in measurable ways, people are noticing that this is beneficial to their career. I was standing in her kitchen. I was just miserable. And she's like, you do not have to be an actor. You don't have to do it.
We might be having a different conversation had she decided to actually take you to LA, based on what I've heard.
It's the same thing like falling in love. You give somebody the opportunity to destroy you and you hope that they won't. And they might, but you can't love without that risk. And so it's the same kind of thing where you go, okay, I'm going to tell this boss what I think.
Welcome to It Gets Late Early. And today I have a very special guest who is going to talk a little bit about what it's like being a recovering child actor, an industry in which ageism might work. Well, actually, maybe on both ends of the spectrum. We could certainly talk about that. But a recovering child actor who has since sort of pivoted. He's actually worked in tech. He's worked as a founder mentor, helping people start their companies. And he's also now shifted into another realm where he is coaching people on how to land workshops, corporate keynotes. And he has actually himself spoken to, over 250 groups of people at companies such as Google, Wayfair, and Remax. So Will Greenblatt is here today, and I'm so excited because I think you have such a cool story to tell that is unlike pretty much any I've heard. So welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Maureen.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. So how old were you when you got into, this realm of acting and what drove you to want to do that?
I was 7 years old, and I went up for an audition, and I booked it. The first thing I ever went up for, which was a lead role in an American feature film. I'm Canadian, for those who don't know. And so I was in Toronto and I went up for this audition and I ended up getting the part before I had any understanding of
formal
what
training?
Acting was. Yeah, or any formal training. But I was a Nepo
talent.
baby. No. I was a Nepo baby. My father and my older sister were both represented by an agent. They were both actors, and my dad is also a writer. And my mother was also in the theater world. She was a writer and a director, and she ran she was artistic director of Nightwood Theatre, which was a feminist theater in Toronto, the first of its kind, I believe, in Canada. Yeah, so I was very much a Canadian theater Nepo baby. So I got this audition through my family, but I happened to book it. I happened to be perfect for the part.
It's incredible.
And it was amazing. And it was with Anne Bancroft and Hannah Hall, who was later in the Virgin Suicides. Like, it was a crazy thing to be in. And it kind of launched this little child acting career where managers from LA were calling my family and being like, bring him out here. And there was this crazy thing. And so luckily my mom was like, no, we're going to not do that.
We might be having a different conversation had she decided to actually take you to LA.
Oh,
based on what I've heard.
Almost certainly.
Yeah.
And I'm serious about that. Like, I think my mom refusing to let me kind of go to LA, and also she stepped in a bit when I was older and kind of convinced me to not do so many auditions in high school so I could kind of have a more normal experience, because I had been very isolated from my classmates up until high school because I was spending all this time away and doing TV shows. And the kids knew I was doing it, and they kind of, I was different and I was in the spotlight. So they were like, look at this fucking kid. And, they didn't like it, and it wasn't cool. It was made me weird and different. And I just didn't spend enough time with them to really make a lot of good friends. And so my mom was really solid in that way. And she kind of knew what might have happened had she just been like full film mom and was like, yeah, let's get you famous. So I was really grateful for that. But I did a lot of TV shows, did some Disney Channel stuff, and thought for sure I was going to be an actor until, life had other plans.
Yeah, isn't it funny how life doesn't usually work out the way in which
Yeah.
we thought it would? So
Yeah.
you've had some pivots, right? So how did you go from the world of acting to getting into like tech specifically and working with founders? That's such an interesting shift.
Yeah. It was a couple shifts. The first one was the year before I graduated high school. It was like a personal tragedy. My brother passed away. And
Oh
it was
man.
really,
Sorry.
yeah, it was a horrible thing for our family. And it really messed me up in particular because I was 17 years old and just, I was figuring out who I was. And then
Oh
this
yeah.
tragedy happens and it was unexpected. And I just started drinking as much as I could and smoking as much weed as I could and like, trying to numb the pain that way. So when I went to theater school, I was just in a very bad mental health state. Mix that with the way that the theater school was run was very much a kind of like emotionally abusive,
Oh.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the movie
Oof.
Whiplash?
I haven't.
Oh, okay. It wasn't that bad, but it was close. Like it's about a really intense music teacher and a guy at Juilliard, I think. But it
Oh
was the
boy.
sense where like they really wanted to push you into these dark emotional places on stage in front of the rest of the class, but not done at all properly and not done with the care for the students and the care for their mental health. And there was no support system. There was nothing. And they came from the old school of like, suck it up, figure it out and go to the bar and drink on the weekends and then get back to work. And it just, it was not healthy. And so we had a bunch of kids drop out with mental health issues. I almost did a bunch of times. I ended up graduating, but I was just like, it had soured acting for me so badly by the time I spent 3 years in that program that I was like, I don't know what the fuck I want to do, but
Yeah.
it's not this. And I got to get
Wow.
out. So yeah, so I went traveling and
Okay.
I just wanted to get away from my life in Toronto and from all this negativity that I was involved with here. But I ended up going with like my two best friends to Europe so the negativity continued and it was not, it didn't
Damn
work.
it.
And so not until I got some separation from them did I start to, get out of this a little bit. But I started teaching English and I was like, oh, teaching's really fun. Like it's kind of like a performance being at the front of a classroom, but it's two-way. I'm not just the performer. There's actually the audience is interacting and they get the microphone and the spotlight at times. And I love that part of it. And then with those same friends and a couple other co-founders, we started a company in China of English education company and business coaching in China. So that was my foray into entrepreneurship. And then I was like, oh, you can start a business. I didn't know what being an entrepreneur meant. I had no idea that one could just start a business without going to business school or having, I just didn't think that was possible. And so that's what led me eventually to start working with tech founders.
Okay. I mean, I think that's pretty cool that you were able to take that sort of confident step despite not knowing anything. Like, that's the thing. We all start with pretty much zero, right? When we do any of these things. And I think it's especially cool when people can make that step even after they had this one course that they thought they were going to take. And then they move, something unexpected happens, something sometimes like in your situation, tragic happens and you start to see things a different way. But I think some people, I think, have a really hard time stepping off the course, off the path that had been prescribed for them, either by others, by society, by convention, by their parents, and sometimes by themselves, of course, right? But being able to pause and recognize, like, this is not for me and not throw good time after bad is something that I wish more people did. And I think it's really great that you recognize that from a young age.
Yeah, thanks. And I do want to shout out my mom again, because she was the one who said to me at one point, I was standing in her kitchen, I was just miserable. And she's like, you do not have to be an actor. You don't have to do it. And that was one of the things that allowed me to let it go, because I thought she would be disappointed in me if I did anything else. I thought my dad would be disappointed in me. My sister was in the business. I was like, I didn't know how else to relate to them. We all were in the same industry. So it was like all my parents' friends growing up were all theater people. And so it's like, this was my whole kind of idea of what one did for a living. Yeah. But because of my mom and a couple other key mentors who were, professional actors and successful ones, they were like, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. It's, and so that was really big for me. I was lucky to have those adults in my life to give me that permission.
Absolutely. Mentorship is so clutch, and I feel so bad. I
Yeah.
feel like we're doing such a horrible job societally and obviously systemically within the workplace of actually setting people up with these people who can help give them those incredible life lessons like what you just shared. And I think we're missing the mark so poorly there. And it's just having much more of an impact than I think anyone's really studying appropriately at this point. But I'm really glad that you had people who could share that there were other ways and that you came up with such an inventive and like super on the nose, spot on way to take all of your acting skills and bring them into another arena. And I think that's something that is really heartening, right? Like you don't have to have the exact sort of experience that, 30 years in this or 15. And of course, in tech and in some other industries, if you have 30 years, don't tell anyone you do because you're not going to hire.
Right.
That's fun. But it's something like you recognize that over the course of time, even just plain life experience is something that you can bring and derive interest in meeting and actually have be foundational for whatever you do, even if it's in a completely different realm. And so, I mean, let's face it, like getting through life is hard. We have to put on a brave face often. Like you could be down in the dumps. Are you going to tell your new boss that like, you were up until 3 a.m. drinking or something the night before, and that's why you're in a bad mood at work? Like, no, people have to kind of shapeshift a little bit. It's not always safe to be our authentic selves, right? And so I think to some degree, everybody, everywhere, in any moment has to act. And so you have had all this exceptional training and you're able to take it and share the insights on how you can show up as a performer. Because sometimes we just got to perform, right? Whether that's you're raising your hand in a meeting, a town hall, at work, and you want to nail it, right? Or you don't want to tell your boss that you're like a depressed mess, right? Like we all have to kind of use those skills. So like how has your background in acting helped you in the workplace?
So I have a slightly different take on this, which
go for it.
I get this kind of question a lot, and I think it's a really important distinction to make. There's a clip of Ian McKellen, I think, on Stephen Colbert's show or something. He's talking to a late night host. And the host says, are actors liars? And Ian McKellen goes, no, it's the opposite. Actors are telling the truth. What a good actor does is they find the emotional truth of a fictional scene and bring that to life, where somebody in the audience recognizes, oh, if I suspend my disbelief and I believe that the scenario is happening, that is the real reaction. That is an honest reaction. That is an honest portrayal of this person's. And it's not a performance. It's actually just finding the fictional truth, if that makes any sense. And so that's the way I approach communication skills, public speaking, is the way what I believe good acting is it's not a performance. It's an embodiment of a hypothetical truth.
That's an interesting way to flip it. I like it.
I had to play an Army veteran in a play I did right after theater school who had PTSD from watching a kid blow up in front of him in Iraq. I have no idea what that's like. I have no idea what it's like to be in a war zone. I have no idea what it's like to witness something like that. I have no idea what it's like to have PTSD from something like that. So what do I do to bring this character to life and not make it a hack job or dishonor the very real pain that these people go through and the real shit that this is talking about? So I just had to research. And luckily, my director, she brought in a mental health professional and a bunch of Army people. And it was, I talked to them. I did as much as I could. I tried to watch some videos and just do everything I could to attack this thing from all different angles, to be like, I need to get myself as close to this as possible so it's real and not what I think it should look like. So that's the job. The job is empathy. How do you, if you're trying to communicate with somebody, it's not how do you pretend to feel something that you don't, or how do you convince them of something? It's how do you understand what you're talking about on such an emotional level that you can truly just connect with the words that you're saying and with the words that they're saying. And if you got to hide that you're hungover for your boss, like, what if you just kind of leaned into it? You don't have to say, yeah, I was out getting hammered last night. But what if you were just like, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, but I'm here and, I've got ideas and I can contribute and let's go. I think it's like the classic, the person who's drunk trying not to appear drunk always seems more drunk. Like you got to own it a little bit. And it's the same thing with being sick. I think, you do want to find energy when you speak. You want to have enthusiasm and passion and clarity, but it should come from a real place, not a like mask that you're putting on. It's like, okay, why do I care about this? Why is this important? Why does this matter for me and the people I'm talking to? And then tapping into that to get the energy rather than being like, it's showtime, because that
Here we
just
go.
yeah,
Zoom.
exactly.
3, 2, 1. I mean, yeah.
It doesn't read right when somebody's doing
No.
that. You can kind of tell.
That's a good point. I've seen plenty of like showboat type people in
Yeah,
corporate where you're just like,
you
oh
don't
God,
trust them.
is there any substance behind that? But I also feel like I'm such a kind of real talk person that I struggled with not oversharing. Like I'll be frank, like unless my boss and I went out the night before together and I'm like, oh dude, I feel really horrible today. Like I'm not gonna give that information. I'm not gonna lie, but I'm not gonna give like specifics because there's just no benefit. Like there's no upside for that, right? You have to be the right sort of psychological safety space for that. And it's just not always the case. But I think it's hard because you hear this narrative about like bringing your authentic self to work and it comes up all the time, like be vulnerable at work, Brene Brown, all that stuff, right? And it's just not always smart business. But figuring out what can you connect on with another person that is real and honest, and you have to just be, I think, a bit judicious with that. But I think, corporate, the theatrics of corporate and the politics of corporate, they do require, I mean, I won't say like showboating necessarily, but sometimes you really do have to almost absorb this and create this sort of like corporate version of yourself, right? And I remember there've been so many times where I'm like, what am I even? I just said like boil the ocean and I kind of meant it, or I said like let's circle back and I didn't like. I was like, oh, like you just become this person and you're like, whoa, what is happening and why am I doing this? It's like you sort of assimilate into that culture, but I feel like, at least in my experience, it's been almost a necessity for people to kind of meld themselves in that sort of corporate sort of drone way, if you will. So
I think I always like to go back to kind of anthropology and evolutionary biology and stuff, because humans, humans are social animals, right? So for me, all of the communication things that we look at have this kind of evolutionary or anthropological background of like, why is it so scary to stand up in front of 4 fucking people and give a presentation?
It is terrifying.
Because if you did that back in the day, if you stood up in front of a few members of your tribe and were like, hey, I think there's more like berries on the other side of that mountain. And if they didn't like what you had to say, they might fucking club you over the head or like,
grim.
kick you out of the cave, or like literally public speaking used to be life or death. And so that's deep in our DNA now.
Mm-hmm.
Like the idea that when all eyes are on you, you better not fuck it up. that used to be a real fear, and that comes from a real honest place. Or the idea of molding yourself to fit into an environment that was also life or death, right? If you didn't fit in,
it's tribalism, right? You got to be
sticking your neck out.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, those who stuck their neck out successfully reaped higher rewards.
Yeah.
So there's a cost benefit that we're constantly doing. Do you fit in and play it safe and kind of stay in the middle of the pack? Or do you stick your neck out, possibly get kicked out of the cave or killed, or possibly, get to be one of the top 2 or 3 members of the tribe and get all the extra acorns and,
You're
whatever.
Right. I love that. Thanks for bringing it back for us.
Yeah.
That's
and that's how I see it in the corporate world. It's like, I don't think anyone should feel shame for saying things that are fucking corporate jargon, because it's natural to do that.
Yeah, you
but then
assimilate
you assimilate, but then you can stop yourself and go, do I need to assimilate this much? What if I just stuck another little toe out? What happens then? And so I have to say, I've never worked in corporate. All my experience comes from coaching corporate. So,
okay.
And watching my wife's career unfold as well. But what I've noticed with my clients is that when I give them permission to be a little more vulnerable, and not the whole story, not the whole life story, you need to know what to share. And we can get into that if you're interested, the framework I give. But to know, if you start to share a little bit, then you start to notice the reaction and you start to build the relationships. And you notice that like, hey, nobody else is doing this because it's too scary. And I'm just doing it like 10%. And that 10% is enough to kind of get me noticed and have people just be a little more on board with my recommendations, or they're paying a little more attention when it's my turn to talk in the meeting. Or I got a ton of great feedback at my AGM last month, and performance reviews are better. Like in measurable ways, people are noticing that this is beneficial to their career. And so, yeah, if you go in there and you go, yeah, I was, railing lines of cocaine last night at the strip club, maybe that's a bit much. And I think
Some
we can
workplaces you get a promotion.
That's right. Like, I think most of us know that that's not appropriate. Mm-hmm. But if you say like, I was really scared when I first took this job because I thought, you guys were all really smarter than me. And I'm just happy to know now that like,
that you're all actually
I belong here. Yeah. You're all dumb. Yeah. But like, I can belong here and you guys have been great. You guys have made me feel welcome or whatever. Right. Like, but just admitting something like that.
Yeah.
I'll shut up for now, but
no, I'm like, so loving this. But what about the interview process? Because when I think about interviewing, it's just like interviewing and the job search process and like landing a job, all of it is like, there's so many parallels with dating. It's laughable, right? It's like everybody's on their best behavior during the interview process. People are saying the right things, not necessarily the truth, right? There's a whole lot going on both sides, right? And so how can people cut through that and see what's actually happening, especially if they're maybe being sold a bill of goods on the other side, right? Like that's something
by the employer.
Yeah. Like how do you have any advice on how to spot people who are overacting or maybe not being completely, genuine?
Yeah, I think looking for signs of someone being present with you is really important.
Yeah.
And being present is different than active listening. You ever know when people go, yeah, mm-hmm, yeah, mm-hmm, and you're just like, shut up, I'm talking. Like that's somebody thinking, my coach told me, my coach told me to nod and say yeah, and now I'm doing it rather than actually listening. So I think it's looking for signs that someone is present with you, and it's tough to say signs. I always get weird when people like Vanessa Van Edwards, who I love, or Vin Gyang, who I also love. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. When people, or Mark Bowden, again, who I love, but sometimes they get asked to do these things where they say, tell us how to spot a liar, or give us the 7 signs of how people are feeling based on their body language or their tone of voice. And I'm just like, that doesn't actually work because people are different and people are different in different situations. And so, and what we found through psychology is people are really bad at spotting liars, but they're very confident that they can. So it's really tricky. It's really tricky to say, these are the ways you can tell if someone's lying or overacting. So what I just try to do is I try to be really present myself with the person and just make sure I'm just really listening, not going like, oh, I know where Maureen is about to go with this next question, but like going, wait, am I listening to the end? Am I trying to keep my mind from wandering to like what I want to say next to make myself sound cool? And then just trying to notice that from the other person.
Okay.
And so I would say if you see an interviewer who's like looking with you, waiting for you to be done and not like looking down a lot and just you feel like they're with you and they're really listening, I think then you can kind of trust that they're at least doing their job properly.
Nice.
I'm sorry I can't give any more practical advice than that because I think it's dangerous to say if they blink their eyes twice, then ask for a $5,000 raise and you'll get it. It's like that's an inexact science.
Fair. Totally
but fair. I do want to say one more thing here, if you don't mind.
Please.
And this relates to back to the story of the being vulnerable at work.
Great.
If you can allow people into your past in a way that helps them understand how you got to today and then even a bit about where you're going, they will build a file folder in their head for you that's almost akin to one they would have for their friend. If you think about your friends, you know where they were born, you know their family members' names, you know where they grew up, if they moved and where they moved to, and you know the kind of things they were into as kids, and you know where they went to high school and university and what they were into then, and you know the work that they do now. Although there's all these memes about nobody knows what each other does anymore. But by letting people in like that, you actually create trust with them. And I don't think this should be done as a manipulation tactic. It should be done without expectation and for a real intention of just saying, I'm going to share some stuff with you about me. And I hope that will make you feel comfortable enough to do the same with me. And then if we are like-minded and if we are both cool people, maybe we can form an actual relationship rather than just a transactional. Okay, we got to get on Teams and work something out. And yeah. So
PTSD.
my framework, totally. I mean, my wife every day, she's like, oh my God. Yeah. But I have a framework for this if this is useful.
Yes, please.
Okay. Goes childhood origin, youth awakening, and adult choice. And the childhood origin is where you start, and you start somewhere in your childhood. And that helps us understand, maybe your hometown or your home country or what your family life was like, some relevant moment. Then you go to your youth awakening where something shifts for you and you realize the world didn't necessarily work the way you thought it did, or there were problems out there that you weren't aware of or something. And then you come to your adult choice. So I decided to use all of this past to do my present work. And now I've done this, this, and this, and this. And that's how I tell all my stories on podcasts. When you asked me my story earlier, I basically gave you my what I call the 3-act origin story. And I do it at the beginning of all my workshops and on my webinars. And it's amazing the reactions you get from people and what it opens up. And then like 5 minutes into a workshop, you have people talking about their childhood traumas or their fears or and that may sound awful to some people, but it's not. It's really beautiful to create that space and to have people feel truly comfortable to share that stuff. And it's amazing what you can do in 60 minutes or 90 minutes when you offer yourself first to people. If you just take that step first and you kind of rip open your armor and go, hey, this is me. You can call me manipulative for sharing this. You can make fun of me for it. You could insult me. You could share it with someone else, but I'm just exposing my underbelly to you. And this is me. People just almost always react very, very positively to it. And so I try to urge people, it feels very dangerous in the corporate world. I get that. But if you can start to just let people in a little bit on who you were as a child, how that formed you, what happened to you when you were younger, how that formed you, and then how that brings us to today, it creates this kind of like real connection with them. And I've been doing it myself for years and years, like consciously, intentionally trying not to do it in a manipulative way, but trying to do it for that real opening up that it creates. And I feel like it's the only way forward out of this like insane hatred we find ourselves in on the planet.
It's so hard to hate up close, right? If you just get to know people, have them open up a little bit, it really is a game changer. And as you were talking about that, I recognize that the people that I've worked for, my direct managers that I have loved and respected and worked the hardest for, they all let me in on a personal level, right? Every single one of them shared about their life story and how they came to be where they are. And they shared their lessons and learnings and hopes and dreams and how things altered course. And it was all foundational to a relationship being established. And it made me a better worker, frankly. So I wish more leaders, and again, like you said, not in a manipulative way, but I wish more leaders actually cared about doing that, because I think it really kind of, it weaves the humanity of the workforce together so much. And I think it can really cause it would create a much better world, frankly, if we had people who would do that. And I do think there's this kind of, maybe it's a bit archaic at this point, the suggestion that you should never really reveal anything personal at work, and work is work, and there's no, connection between personal and work, and you have to just keep it all very separate. But I also think that was probably born of some realization that sometimes that can be dangerous. I know I had a boss once who very manipulative, incredibly manipulative, and tried to get me to open up to her, tried to get to it's funny, this has probably happened to a lot of other people, too. It's like you get hired expressly for your specific experience and expertise. And they're like, we want you because you've done this in the past. And like, you're the perfect person. And we need this change at our organization. So you get the job, you get in, and then you're like, oh yeah, so actually, I think we should move in this direction instead because of what I've done here and how I learned about like what to do. And, like, remember when you wanted to hire me for that? And then people were like, shut up. Like, we don't want anything.
We don't do that around here. Yeah.
Right? We don't do that around here. Like, who
adapt
do you think
to
you
the
are,
culture.
lady?
Yeah.
New boss, a new employee, like, get out of here.
Yeah.
So I've had that. And it's funny because I remember there's this one incredibly manipulative boss that I had who tried to let me get close to her and then asked me, she was like, you can tell me your like absolute direct opinion, like where are we going wrong in this business? And I thought she like actually really wanted to know because they hired me to be the first US person doing partnerships here. And she took everything I said and just used all of it against me. And it ended up making, and I wasn't like lighting the world on fire. I was giving like really tangible, good examples of why the strategy should change and how I would do that. And I actually even had proof for why it would work. And it ended up like getting me kicked out of the organization for just being honest, which is crazy. So some bosses do that way. That is, I suppose, always a risk. But I like to think that the benefits outweigh the risks in general.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is it wouldn't be effective if it wasn't a risk,
right?
So Charles Duhigg says in his book Super Communicators that the reason why vulnerability is so shocking, like, but in a good way, like when a speaker is vulnerable on stage, people kind of stop what they're doing and listen. Or when someone's vulnerable at a dinner party, everyone stops what they're doing and listens. Or when or that moment on American Idol or America's Got Talent when somebody goes, the violins come in and somebody goes, I was living in my car for the last 27 years and I got divorced 17 times and this is my last chance. And then all of a sudden you're rooting for that person to do a good job on stage. Like the reason why the vulnerability thing is so eye-catching is because it's risky. That's the very reason why it catches people's attention. And it's the reason that you're able to stand out by being vulnerable. It's because it's a risk. If it wasn't risky, it wouldn't do anything. And if everybody did it and it was totally safe, it wouldn't catch people's eye.
You're right.
So the risk part of it is what makes it important. And so it's the same thing like falling in love. You give somebody the opportunity to destroy you and you hope that they won't. And they might, but you can't love without that risk. And so it's the same kind of thing where you go, okay, I'm going to tell this boss what I think. Weirdly enough, I just had a client who was worried about doing exactly what you told me. And everybody else on this call we were on was saying, don't say it, don't say it. And I said, I think you should say it to the boss because I think the upside outweighs the risk. And she did say it to the boss. He ended up giving her a massive raise because he was like, I am so glad you were honest with me. This is exactly what I needed to hear. This is such helpful information. Like, I really value you. It was like the perfect scenario. And so, and again, that could have gone wrong. But my philosophy is like, you got to do it and you got to be real.
No risk, no reward. Yeah, no risk, no reward.
I told, I had an ex-girlfriend who used all of my vulnerable things against me in fights. It was really toxic and she used to use it. And then I clammed up for a few years because I was like, I can't share any things with women that I'm dating because it hurt too much when she used it. But it was only affecting me negatively and my relationships. It was keeping me safe on some level, but it wasn't helping me. It wasn't making my life better. It was making my life worse. So I realized like I have to open up and share the fact that my brother passed away, the fact that I had these traumas from my past or the fact that like whatever. And if I don't share them, I'm just not going to heal from them. I'm not going to like develop any proper relationships. I have to be able to share with no expectation of how the other person receives and acts on the information. And that's an easy thing to say when your salary is not on the line and, you don't have 2 kids. So I understand that, but I'm just saying like, we need to look at benefits as well as risk.
Absolutely true. And I love that story. And man, I wish I'd had that boss in that situation versus mine.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
hey,
totally.
You win some, you lose someone. We took the
did you a
risk.
favor by kicking you out of that
Exactly. It was an
organization.
abysmally terrible organization. I don't even want to waste a second on them.
Sure.
But not on my resume, not on my LinkedIn, by the way. Don't look. I don't want that on anyone. But so unfortunately, given the times, we've got a lot of layoffs happening. We get performance-based firings happening. We have, RTO mandates coming and blowing families up and systems up and all that. Lots going on. Government contraction in the U.S. happening. So there are a lot of people, and I think particularly a lot of older people who are at least like sort of midlife, if you will. Maybe they have kids, maybe aging parents they're caring for in certain places. They're going to be finding themselves either in the job market for the first time in a long time, maybe not having practiced interviewing or, having any of those loops or anything like that for quite some time. And I wonder if you can share some guidance to people who maybe, they're not the people who raise their hands in meetings, right? Or they're not particularly comfortable going into an interview loop. They're out of practice, whatever. They're concerned about any number of things, from a very competitive job market to ageism to anything else that could get in their way. How can you give some people who are finding themselves in that sort of a space a little bit of a leg up in terms of how can they have the confidence to speak and in those sorts of situations a little bit more confidently, I guess. Yeah.
That's a great question. I have a resource for this that I can share. If I don't know if you can put a link.
Yes, yeah. I sure can. I absolutely will.
And it's like the ultimate guide to free public speaking resources. So I'll link
Brilliant.
that. It's a bunch of YouTube videos, articles, things. And then the other thing is there's some great speech coaches out there on LinkedIn and YouTube and Instagram now. I mentioned Vin Gyong. He's the one, like, if you want to just get better at articulating yourself, speaking with confidence, speaking clearly, pausing, eliminating fill words, using your voice, body language. That's the stuff I used to really focus on. I'm much more interested in storytelling nowadays rather than and building a speaking career. But there's some great resources out there, and again, I'll link to those.
Perfect. And I'm sure some people actually will want to shift into speaking and pivot into other things too. So that could be impactful.
Yeah, so the thing I've been thinking about recently is like this new kind of career that's, I mean, probably not new, but it's really been burgeoning in the last few years, especially since social media, is what I call the speaker, writer, coach, creator. And it's the idea of somebody like yourself, like me, like, a bunch of other people we know who that's what they do for a living. They talk about shit, they write about shit, they work with people, and they create content. And that's their product. And, that's a weird, scary way to make a living, but it's amazing. It's amazing how it scales and how it impacts people, how it opens the door for opportunities, and the fact that you can make a living and that I found a way to make a living on it and is amazing to me. And so I'm much more interested these days in kind of helping people who may want to leave the corporate world or at least supplement their income with the corporate world to start to figure out how to do that. And to me, it's just all about knowing what story you're telling, knowing what makes you unique, figuring out that thing of like, why are you uniquely positioned to be talking about a certain thing? You've nailed that for me. Like the ageism in the workplace with your podcast and with your LinkedIn content and like the videos you make is just so awesome. I personally just would love to hear more of your backstory, but you're doing it amazing without that. And it's a skill and it's a mission for you. I know it's like it's because you want to tackle this problem, but there's a mechanism to making a career out of it, and it takes knowledge of marketing and sales and even operations and all the accounting and all the shitty things that we don't like doing. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm. Yeah, because creatives hate numbers.
Yes, we do.
And organization. So I think I think people should start to have a think about that and go like, well, if I maybe want to either reinvent my career, not feel so at the mercy of a fickle job market or whatever, or go it alone and start a consulting business or a coaching business or a speaking business or write the book I've always wanted to write. What do you need to get in line in order to do that? And there's a bunch of assets and a bunch of shit, you got to figure out, but it starts with just becoming more and more aware of that. And so that's what I'm focused on right now. I work mostly with consultants and coaches and like leaders of who are making career transitions. But, these tips and tricks and whatever can help anyone who realizes that you've got to start making a name for yourself in some way in order to provide some safety for your career.
Yeah. And it's not always a comfortable thing for people to hear, particularly those who are a little bit more reluctant to speak out or put their name on things. And they've maybe been just a little quieter. Maybe they're, introverts, for example, right? So it can be a really uncomfortable thing. But to your point, I think it can also be really uplifting to consider how many people go out and go on their own and completely reinvent themselves. You are a great example of that. And, I've seen your clips of your speeches and you're exceptional. Like you are an incredible storyteller and you are able to deliver such depth and such great anecdotes, and it really makes you feel something, which is like the whole point, right?
Yeah.
And
I really
so
appreciate that. Thank you.
it's true. It's true. And your content's great. Like, I read your posts mostly. You don't do a ton of video, but some. And it's like every time I see them, I can like hear your voice, right? Like it's funny. Like I can
That's good. That's what I'm trying. That's what I'm going for. Yeah.
Exactly. So it does matter. And I think that there are ways to do that are not necessarily going super public on LinkedIn to create your own thing, right? But you can start small, like do something internally at your organization, like force yourself to get a little uncomfortable, because unfortunately, inconvenient truth.
Yeah. Put a slide of yourself as a baby picture of yours at the start of your next presentation, and talk about why your childhood kind of makes you care about the topic that you're talking about today. Just try that.
People don't think about that much. You're right.
Yeah, try that. Or try in a conversation when you're putting forth a recommendation, saying why you personally care about it from a personal reason. This sounds scary. I can hear the pushback already from some people, but it's just start talking about, like, there's nothing that builds trust better than realizing that somebody has a real personal reason for why they're speaking up. Because then it's not about like, oh, you're trying to get something, or you're trying to finagle something, or there's a Machiavellian thing. It's just like, I care about this because, you hear a founder say like, I started this medical device company because I saw there was a gap in the market and I could make shitloads of money, versus my mother had this illness and I wanted to do something about it. You know what I mean? Like, who are you going to trust
feel
more?
different.
Yeah. Who are you going to trust more? Totally.
Yeah.
Like, and so I know who I want to back. I know who I want to work with. I know who I want to get on the phone with. And so that's just what I keep coming back to is put yourself, put your personality, put your story, put your perspective, put your experience front and center, or at least what's relevant. You don't have to give the whole game away. You don't have to tell them all the, crazy shit you've done in your life, but you want to start understanding where you come from, how that's made you who you are, why that's taking you to now, and then where you're going. And that allows people to get on board. And so it doesn't have to be on LinkedIn or social media, but it's just you talking to people.
I think that introspection is not all that common, right? Like people don't like to do that, to sit with that. Like, who am I? Why am I here? Do I want to be here? Like, what's the thread that got me from A to B? And does this feel right and true to myself, right? Who I am today, not who I was like 20 years ago or 10 years ago, whatever, right? And who I want to be in the future, right? But I think it's an uncomfortable topic for a lot of people. It's like, ooh, how do I go which direction? But at the end of the day, if you are true to yourself, that comes through. And I think people buy people, that old adage, that old sales adage. It's true. Like, relationships are the currency, right? And if you aren't showing up as yourself, if you're hiding so much of yourself, if you're acting, if you're putting the mask on, I think that can make that sort of facilitation of actual meaningful connection and relationships like pretty hard to do.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. Nobody can get in there. And it's just amazing what I've been able to accomplish in my business with no skill, savvy, or experience as a business person. I'm business illiterate, or I was, at least when I got in the game. And the only thing that made me get anywhere was my ability to talk and speak on stage, but also my ability to tell my story. And I didn't even know that was a good thing to do. It just was my instinct, because I came from acting, and I came from, this background of being emotionally honest and vulnerable, whatever, as a career. And so, and it got me, it launched my career, and it's what has allowed me to achieve, such as I have. It's not anything crazy, but it's a successful, business that it hasn't died. And so
seems great to me.
That's storytelling.
Happy. You're happy.
Yeah. I'm happy doing it. I love the work, and it's able to provide for my family. It's able to, I enjoy it. I look forward to Monday morning, and what more can you ask for, Yeah.
What a dream. That's really awesome. And I think it's a great testament to, hey, we're all on this ride together. We're going to figure it out. We're going to have peaks and valleys. We're going to have fits and starts. We're going to go in one direction and then realize it's the wrong way. And you're going to figure it out. And, just what matters to you changes over the course of time. I know when I became a parent, everything shifted for me, what I wanted and needed in a career. And I think that that's something that you can't necessarily adequately prepare for. Like nothing can get you ready, and you don't know how you're going to feel. It's like your whole persona, everything you've embodied, everything you've been about, just like in an instant, is completely up in upheaval, right? Like it's like, oh, it's not all about me anymore.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, right.
Right.
When you just go like, wild. Oh my God, I would do anything for this kid, and
yeah.
But you also think that like I also want her to be proud of me. And I also want her to grow
Mm-hmm.
up watching her parents not like suffer under the weight of a horrible job that they hate. I mean, there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of parents who sacrifice everything for their children and to give them a better life. And that's a beautiful, amazing thing to do. But if you can do work that you love and lights you up and doesn't make you miserable and sad and overtired and resentful and bitter and whatever, like on the weekends, so you can actually enjoy your time off with your family, I think that's good. And so it's like I'm I would throw away my career in a heartbeat if I had to choose between it and my daughter. But while I'm still trying to design my career the way I want it, I'm going to keep trying to do it the risky way, the like, my own way, and to make it mean something to me versus play it safe and try to do something that I hate and just makes me feel like shit all the time so that I not,
Yeah. Which might not even be safe. Like I remember it was always like,
yes.
get a corporate job and just keep going. It's like, oh, it's not exactly working out for everybody. Right. So that's the other element is just, nothing's guaranteed in life. That's been one of the hardest things for me to recognize as like a midlife person.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not, what? Like, oh, wait, no security blanket. We're all just going
Yeah.
it alone and things shift. So
Yeah.
it's a destabilizing realization, but it's an important one to make. And I think if you take the hopeful side of it, it's like, you're going to figure it out. Something's
Yeah.
going to happen, just keep
And
on
as long
rolling.
as you make relationships, nothing can happen
Yes.
without other people. So you have to treat people properly. You have to make good relationships. You have to be a good
Yes.
person. And, that to me, I've always understood that is like relationships are everything and they've got to be real. You can't just you make it transactional or pretend to be something you're not. But that kind of is the job security. It's like if you work really hard to build your network and then you can kind of feel a bit secure. It's like that safety net of community.
It's so accurate. And I think that's why a lot of people, if they don't keep that up, right, if they don't pay mind to it, it becomes so overwhelming when there's job loss, unexpected job loss, right? Because it's like, oh, I haven't talked to any of these people in like 10 years. What do I do? And you feel uncomfortable asking for a favor. I mean, ask anyway is what I'll say to anybody who's uncomfortable. Most people want to help others. And if you haven't talked to someone in a long time, they're still going to remember your interactions in the past and how you made them feel, right? Like, and they're probably going to want to help you. So do it anyway. And, but it is easier if you've, had some meaningful connections with people and you aren't just starting from scratch. Like, hey, can you hook me up with a job? Right. So it just makes everything easier.
Totally. And I try to make, whenever I'm reaching out to anyone for a while, like even if in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, I'd love to have a conversation with this person about something specific. I just try to let go of that for the first interaction. Just go, let me just like not treat them like a transaction first. And let me just go like, how are you? Like, hey, how are you doing? And then if it naturally goes there, great. If not, it's like, okay, I don't have to now everything has to be a transaction up front. And so I just feel a bit better when I do it that way. When I'm going to check in with this person, even if I maybe want it to have an agenda, let me try to do it without one and just see how they are in life because I give a shit. And
because people are cool. Like talk to them. You'll learn something.
And their
maybe
stories
even about
are
yourself
like,
too.
Totally. Yeah. And then when you just ask them about the things they like their family and their, and the things they're up to that don't have to do with like how they can benefit you at work. Yeah. You have these great conversations and you know.
Yeah. 100%. All of that. Love all of that.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So how can people learn more about your work? How can people perhaps learn some things from you? Get involved. Engaged is the wrong term. Get involved.
I would say LinkedIn is the best place to go because it has a lot of my other stuff. But if you go to LinkedIn at Will Greenblatt, that's where my newsletter kind of exists as well. My newsletter is there. My community, I have a community called Speaking Heroes where we meet twice a week and we work on both speaking and storytelling. And then I just do general coaching for like people building their personal brands through speaking. And I do one-on-one corporate workshop coaching. So taking people who, coaches and consultants and entrepreneurs and helping them turn their expertise into like a repeatable, scalable paid workshop. And then I also speak. So if anybody listening to this is in corporate, if they want to bring me in to talk about storytelling and public speaking and leadership mostly and change management, those are the topics I tend to speak on. So yeah, and they can find me kind of LinkedIn is the hub for all that.
I will hook it up in the links in the comments and or wait, wherever it is, the show notes.
Show
That's
notes,
what I'm
yeah.
trying. The show notes of like that's the wrong term.
Who
But I'm
remembers
just so
where
happy.
anything is?
Right, right. What is time? Where is everything? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad you came on the show today. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for sharing with everybody. And I know I've learned a few things, and you've made me think a little bit more deeply about the way I'm going to show up. And I know everybody else who listens to this is going to feel the same.
That's the best. And just thank you so much for having me.